Once you have all your pieces cut out, go ahead and mark diagonal lines on the squares as noted in the pattern. Here you can see me prepping my pieces to go over to my sewing machine, and I like to chain stitch as I'm working so that I don't have to keep getting up and down from my machine. So I try to prepare as much as I can sew at once and then head to my machine. So here you're gonna see me adding corners to the larger squares as well as to the center of the sunflower and working on the little half square triangle pieces as well. So now that we have those pieces sewn, I'm going to trim the seam allowances here and then iron these corners. And so you're going to see me finger press the corner first and then gently iron. I am using a wool mat, and that just kind of helps hold the heat as I'm ironing. Notice that I'm not manhandling these pieces with my iron. I'm not shoving the iron toward the corner. I am just gently pressing to not distort the different pieces here. So that's my center, and then these larger squares, we're going to be making a flying geese essentially at the top of that unit. And so again, I'm going to finger press, gently press down on that seam to flatten it, and then get those ready for the next step. I do like to glue baste when I am sewing, especially with smaller pieces like this. And so I just put a little bit of glue in the corner and use my iron to just set those in place. For these little half square triangle pieces, I'm going to actually press these seams open. I find that when I'm sewing smaller pieces like this, it tends to be helpful to press a lot of my seams open in terms of reducing bulk and also just making it a little bit easier to make everything line up nice and neat. So I've already sewn these little second corners on, and I'm gonna press those real quick to set the seam and then trim the seam allowance, and just like before, finger press and then press those toward the corner to finish those off. We also need to make some secondary petal units, and there's two different orientations of these. So make sure that you're following the pattern as to how many of each and the direction of the seams for these particular units. And for these, I'm gonna, again, finger press, gently press with my iron, and then press those seams open since we have a lot of seams close together here at this point with these little pieces. For the leaf units, I like to just make sure that I'm sewing these in the right direction. So you can see me sort of double checking how they're gonna lay back when they get flipped over. And I do that because I've messed them up before. So cautionary tale for you. And you're just gonna follow the pattern for these, and again, finger press and then press it with your iron as you put these units together. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna trim these pieces back down to size. Now, I know you're gonna be tempted to just go ahead and put your sunflower together, but trust me, nobody is perfect, and when you're sewing these small pieces, it's easy for things to get out of whack. So I like to just make sure that my pieces are nice and square, and I'll do this with all the pieces that I used these corner triangles for. So don't be discouraged if as you're sewing something is a little bit wonky. We're going to trim that up, and this is one of my best tips for making sure that your pieces line up nicely, especially when you're working with small pieces. So don't skip this step. Be sure to just double check that everything is the proper size. The next thing you're gonna do is get all your pieces ready and then sew them together in units. And so here I've already sewn the units as shown in the pattern instructions, and I'm gonna start joining the units. So I've got this center piece where I've added the top and bottom of the flower to the center, and then I'm going to get ready to begin building on that. For this left side of the flower, we're going to need to do a partial seam, and so I'm going to use a pin to mark about 1.5 inches from the bottom of that seam so I know where to stop sewing. I'm going to start at the top and sew to where the pin is, and notice that I did not sew all the way down that seam. I'm going to add my little top strip here and then add this plain sky piece on the left. Now, to do the partial seam, we got to finish the left side, and so I'm going to pin this up out of the way so I can add the leaf unit, and I'm going to sew that on and then come back and finish this partial seam. And so I'll fold the piece over and line up the different seams that need to match and pin those in place, and then I'll finish that seam. So I'll just start from the bottom and sew to where I had stopped sewing, being sure to backstitch so that nothing comes apart on me later. Now that the pouch front is together, the next step is to adhere interfacing to the wrong side using your iron. You're also going to adhere that to the wrong side of the pouch back as well. If you're wanting to curve the corners, you can do this using either the template that is included in the pattern, or you can use the bottom of a glass or spool cap or whatever circle shaped item you have handy. You're just going to put it against the straight edges of the corner and mark the curve and then cut away the curve. You're also going to do this on the pouch back as well as the lining pieces of the pouch as well. If you want to add any faux quilting or detail stitching, this is the time to do that. So making a zipper tab is pretty easy. I take a 2-inch wide strip, fold it in half, fold the raw edges in and press it well. For this pouch, I'm going to trim the zipper to be 1 inch shorter than the width of the top of the pouch. And I'm going to mark where that is and then trim the zipper tape off, making sure I don't cut the zipper pull off. You can put a zipper pull back on, but it's not my favorite activity. So I'm going to trim that and then enclose the raw edges of the zipper tape inside a zipper tab and just stitch that in place. Once you've sewn the zipper tab in place, you're going to trim it flush with the edges of the zipper tape, and then you're ready to install your zipper. So the zipper, we're going to align that in the center on the front of the pouch, and I've got the zipper face down. I have about 1/2 inch on either side of it, and I'm going to clip it in place. And if you are new to sewing zippers, this would be a good time to just baste that in place with a line of stitches. I'm pretty comfortable putting in zippers, and so I'm just going to do this all in one step. I'm going to go ahead and pin my lining in place and then take that over to my sewing machine and use my zipper foot to install the side of the zipper. Generally, when I'm installing a zipper, I usually have the exterior of the pouch on top. I find that my lining will just travel a little bit less with the feed dogs, and things tend to stay in place a little bit better. As you approach the zipper pull, you're going to stop and just move that out of the way so that you can maintain a nice straight seam. And you'll repeat this process to install the other side of the zipper on the pouch back and other piece of lining. I did some top stitching on either side of the zipper just to hold all the layers in place and make the lining lay flat. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna open the zipper so that we can turn the pouch later. And then we're gonna manipulate it so that the exterior are right sides together and the lining pieces are right sides together. I typically will start by clipping that seam where the lining and the exterior meet, making sure that that seam lines up nice, and then I'll work my way around the exterior and then finally around the lining. So at the bottom of the lining, we're gonna make some marks here so that we leave a 3 or 4 inch wide opening to turn the pouch later. And otherwise, you're gonna stitch all the way around the entire pouch, starting and stopping with a back stitch at those marks. So to sew these corners, I like to have my machine set to where the needle will remain in the down position when I stop sewing. This allows me to lift the presser foot every few stitches and just gently rotate my fabric under the machine every few stitches to maintain a nice curved stitch line. And then you're going to repeat this process on all the curves, and then you can go as fast as you want, those of you especially that own a Juki, on those straightaways. Once you've got your pouch all sewn, you're going to then gently turn it inside out. So we'll use that hole we left in the lining to pull it through. And this is why it's real important that your zipper was open before you pinned it to sew. And you're just going to manipulate it carefully and use your fingers to sort of push out the corners and flatten out the seams a little bit along the edge. Make sure that it's nice and neat. Once you get your pouch all turned right sides out, you're going to press it well, and then you're going to close the bottom of the lining by hand or machine, whichever is your preference. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial, and I invite you to like and subscribe to our channel.